At Outback Steakhouse, we live by Aussie rules. And Aussie rule number 1 is ensuring steak satisfaction every time. We offer the highest quality cuts of steak, seasoned and seared to perfection, with a secret blend of 17 herbs and spices and cooked just the way you want. So join us tonight in Mobile at 4017 Airport Boulevard. We're open daily for lunch at 11 a.m. Plan your visit at Outback.com. Aussie rules.
Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of The Cheapest Meal presented by Deep Fried Draft. My name is Brian Bosarge. This is episode 10, 10th episode of the relaunch of The Cheapest Meal here on Blog Talk Radio, and we've got a great guest today. Let's bring him in now. He's a football agent based out of Charleston, South Carolina for Atkinson Sports, and if they remade Jerry Maguire today, the movie's going to be about him. My guest today, Austin Atkinson. Austin, how you doing?
Brian, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Known you for a few years now, written up some scouting reports for a few of your clients, or about a few of your clients, I should say. So I wanted to touch base with you about how they're doing. We're going to start with Kofi Amasia with the Packers.
Kofi, it's Amici is how you pronounce it, and he's actually gearing up for training. Yeah, he's gearing up for training camp. Starting here, before too long. He'll be in a battle at the guard center spot. Kind of a flexible guy. He played left tackle in college, but what they like to do up there in Green Bay is take those athletic left tackles and turn them into interior guys. So you'll see him getting rotations in training camp at most likely guard and center. And
all right, you got a couple guys, I believe.
Yeah, I got a couple guys out of this year, out of the 2018 draft class. I got Alan Knott out of the University of South Carolina, and he is out there with the San Francisco 49ers, expecting him to compete for the backup center spot this year. And then staying in the Bay Area, I've got Ryan Urachek out of Marshall University. He was a heralded tight end for Marshall, but he is now a fullback / H-back at the next level with the Oakland Raiders. So he will be out there competing for that spot as well in training camp.
Yeah, I think he's got a chance to be a successful H-back in the league just with his route running and receiving skills.
And he's got amazing hands too.
That is a fact. That is a fact. The main reason I want to have you on today is I want to discuss these two new spring leagues that are starting up. We got the Alliance of American Football starting up in February of 19, and we're going to have the relaunch of the XFL in 2020. From an agent's point of view, I want to tell me I want you to pro and con this thing for these leagues.
Okay. Well, let's back up a second and put a little perspective on this for your listeners that maybe don't realize just how many spring leagues have appeared and disappeared in the last decade. This will be my 7th draft coming up in 2019. And during the last 7 years, I have seen at least half a dozen leagues, proposed spring leagues come and go, and none of them have been successful ultimately. So there's a lot of trepidation out there in the agent community anytime somebody mentions a new spring league. Now, the difference here is with the Alliance and with the XFL, first of all, we all remember the XFL because at least that was in existence before. With the Alliance, you've got a staggering amount of former NFL executives that are running these teams. I know you're located down there in Lower Alabama, and you got a guy like Phil Savage, who's had a great run with the Senior Bowl in Mobile. He's going to be out as the GM of the Phoenix franchise in the Alliance. So for guys like that, guys like Phil and other guys around the league, to step away from a position like that and go to a startup spring league, that gives me a lot of hope as an agent, because if those guys are willing to jump in, then I'm a little more willing send my players to maybe their combine or their tryouts or, otherwise steer them there, maybe instead of going up to Canada.
Right, and just based off what we're reading and what we've been told, the pay structure seems to be on par or pretty close to the CFL, so I imagine that's got to be pretty tantalizing for some of your clients.
It is, especially I did not have a player in the CFL this past season, but the year before I had a player in Montreal and I had one in Saskatchewan, and both of them, the starting salaries were around, let's say, $55,000, that's U.S. dollars. And you're looking at the Alliance and the XFL now talking about average contracts being around $75,000. So that's a nice little bump, not to mention not having to worry about a passport, maybe not having to worry about cold weather as much, and getting to play in front of, maybe your friends and family, which is a little bit harder to do if you're off in Canada.
Well, and that's another, I think, a win for the Alliance. Is which they announced how their allocation system was going to work, and basically, let's just use a guy like Alan Knott for an example. Let's say Alan Knott doesn't make it with the 49ers this year. Well, let's say he makes it in the Alliance. We know he's going to play in Birmingham. So, I mean, that's got to be a win, I think.
Yeah, that is, and he's a native Georgian, so to be able to be not far from friends, and of course the SEC fans that are around the Birmingham market, are probably very familiar with a player from South Carolina, whereas maybe they don't know as much about a guy from the West Coast. So I like the allocation system that the Alliance has released recently here, and I guess it just remains to be seen how the XFL is going to do their allocations, or if they're going to follow a similar program there.
Right. Now, the other thing I saw about the Alliance was they basically have 3-year contracts, but they're non-guaranteed, but they all have an out to the NFL, but they don't have an out to the XFL. So to me, they're going to have that 1-year advantage on the XFL, and I don't know if that's going to hurt Vince McMahon's league or not. I guess being first to market in a lot of things is an advantage, but we'll just see how it shakes out. So I guess let's just tie a bow on that. Do you feel that the Alliance and or the XFL, can they sustain long-term success?
I think they can. We have seen over and over again that there is an appetite for football, especially, I live here in Charleston, South Carolina, so this is a football crazy state between Clemson and South Carolina fans. I think that getting a model where you've got former NFL executives, that in itself shows, that was smart marketing on their part to go ahead and get those guys and get them in the fold. I think it will just come down to how successfully they can either launch careers or revive careers from guys who may have had a taste of the NFL briefly, and if they can continue serving as a farm system above, in addition to the college ranks, if they can serve as a farm system where guys can continue to stay, get reps, stay strong, stay in shape, and be ready to go jump to a NFL training camp after the Alliance or XFL season is done, then I think it could probably sustain for a while. But, money drives everything. So advertisers are going to be necessary. People are going to have to buy tickets to the games themselves. But again, we've got another year or so to see how this pans out.
I think the main thing that I'm looking forward to seeing is, or hoping to happen, is development of offensive linemen, because that's been a big issue, in my opinion, of players coming from college and these spread offenses, and they get to the NFL and they're just boned because they have no idea how to pass block NFL schemes. Right.
Yeah, that's for sure. That is a big piece of the puzzle right there. Is keeping growth, letting these offensive linemen develop, and you're not going to learn if you're only in a training camp for 2 months, and maybe you play a few preseason games, and then you're out of football for a year before you get to try again.
Agreed. we talked about the senior, but you talked about Phil Savage and Senior Bowl earlier, and I don't think a lot of people know or know that you were one of the main honchos there of the Medal of Honor Bowl a few years ago. I felt that was a game that had better talent accumulation than the NFLPA game did, certainly better than what we know as the Tropic Bowl now. First of all, I just want to go, what is it like getting these players into a game like that? Like how what's the process like?
Okay, well, if you go back towards, let's say, May or June, okay, my boss, Cal McCombs, he was personnel director, I was deputy director. He and I would sit down and look at all the rising seniors coming up, and we would kind of figure out who would be a great prospect for our game, because there's some guys right off the bat that they're Senior Bowl level players, and you really don't want to waste your time sending them an invitation. Maybe a handful of them, but you don't want to waste your time sending that invitation. I tell you, we sent out 143 invitations to the 2015 game to fill out a 104-player roster. So we were pretty good as far as targeting and had a good acceptance rate with our guys, and we had a little luck with guys not having injuries in bowl games or things like that. So pretty much everybody that accepted was able to come and attend. We drew kind of a geographic circle. It didn't make sense for us to have a lot of West Coast guys being in South Carolina. So luckily we live in a talent-rich area where there's a lot of football programs. So we tried to hit up about a 450-mile radius from Charleston. And now that goes all the way down to Tampa, Florida. That goes out into Alabama. That includes Morgantown, West Virginia, Washington, D.C. area. So there's a lot of great football programs, big and small, within that radius. And that's where we wanted to get about 75 to 80% of our roster was from inside that circle. And that's what we were able to do. There's still a good number of guys in the league right now that played in that last game in 2015. So we're really proud of being able to give those guys the shot that they needed to impress the scouts that we had here in Charleston.
I mean, so I guess my question is here. The attendance for the game was good. You had TV coverage with NBC Sports Network. What happened? Yeah.
Well, we played in a very old stadium where the visitor stands were, I think, built in 1941, 42, and these were just old bleachers. And they found some structural issues back in, I think, 2016. You had not only did you have structural issues, you had lead paint. And when you start talking about abatement options on how to either fix that, it was just a very tall task. And because we didn't own the stadium, we were at the mercy of whatever the ownership was going to do. And they have since torn down one half of the stadium and are in the process of putting stuff in the ground and getting a new visitor stands. But right now, you can't sell sponsorships when you've got your potential attendance cut in almost half because of the seating arrangement. And even when you talk about maybe bringing in temporary bleachers and stuff, you still needed a place for the TV people to broadcast, and there's just a lot of things that go into it. So it's kind of out of our hands right now, but I know that our chairman is still staying in touch with television networks and other folks. And, I think once the stadium issue solves itself, look to see maybe that rebounding in the near future.
This wouldn't have been a chance to maybe move to a different school or something like that to house the game, or is that's not an option?
The Medal of Honor Bowl is a 501c3, and the primary beneficiary is the National Medal of Honor Museum. Well, the National Medal of Honor Museum is being built here in Charleston, and when your primary beneficiary is here, it's a little bit hard to pick up and move.
Right.
The very thing you're supporting is right a few miles from the stadium. So I wouldn't say it was hamstrung, but it just made it more difficult. And our chairman and the board just opted to go idle rather than seek out a new city, which is, we've seen some all-star games just move cities multiple times. And our leadership chose not to go that route.
Well, I don't know what the distance is between Charleston and Conway without looking it up on Google Maps there, but I know the Coastal Carolina facility looks pretty damn sweet, and that wouldn't be a bad spot for a game, I guess.
No, it's not. That's an up-and-coming stadium.
I hope we get a chance to see the game again soon. I'd love to get up there for it if it happens, because, like I said, I really enjoyed watching that game on television. Had some great prospects in it.
Indeed, we did, and I hope to see it back someday too.
Well, Austin, I know since you're based in South Carolina, and I'm a Gamecocks fan through and through here, so I've been writing some SEC preview pieces, and for South Carolina's piece coming up, I'm projecting them to go 7-1 in the SEC and 10-2 overall. Is that crazy, or is that achievable?
I wouldn't say crazy, considering most Gamecock fans I know are saying similar things. But I think you got to get it over that Georgia hump early in the season. That's a huge test. I think maybe playing it earlier in the season is a benefit. Maybe catch them before they've got into full season mode there. But I don't think that's crazy, but 10 wins is going to be tough overall. The SEC record, I think the non-conference schedule is pretty doable. Who do you got? You had Marshall this year coming to town. Is that right?
Yeah, Marshall.
Yeah.
Got this handy here. We have Marshall, Coastal Carolina is the opener.
Yeah.
And Chattanooga is the week before Clemson. My two losses, I had them losing to Georgia and losing to Clemson and winning everything else.
Yeah.
Those were the two losses. I just don't think they're ready for – I don't think they can compete with Clemson yet.
Yeah, it remains to be seen. I think there are some good O-linemen that are filling in this year. Stanley, Bailey, among others. You've got Deebo Samuel back, and he's a giant X factor because we know what he can do with the ball in his hands, receiving and in the kick return game. So a guy like that stays healthy. Last season would have probably been totally different. But we know he got hurt, and, the team was able to still, put out a pretty good season, but you always wonder what would have happened if he'd have been able to play the whole season.
Agreed. I think their skill position players are on par with anybody else in the SEC. That includes Alabama and everything. I fully believe that. Yeah. But I know you're cover the South Carolina high school sports scene, so we're going to stay with the Gamecock question here. I want to know, is freshman quarterback DeCarrion Joyner, is he the real deal?
Wow, he's special. I actually covered 2 of his games last year for the Post and Courier, including their first-round playoff game. And when you see a talent like that at the high school level, the only downside is the guy barely played in the second half that often, because they would roll up to a 35-0 lead or 42-7 halftime lead, and and the coach would usually pull a guy like that in maybe after the first series of the second half, something like that. So I never got to see him play a complete game. Not that that's a bad thing, but that's just, it's a victim of circumstance. You don't want to get your guy hurt. Now, he is dynamic. I will say that. He can see the field. I'm very interested to see. I think it's been a while since South Carolina has had a quarterback with that skill set. I would go back to maybe a Savell Newton, maybe.
Yeah. Probably.
Although I feel like Joyner might be a little more polished, and that's probably due to these guys start training at such a young age these days, and they start specializing, and they start getting better coaching, and there's just more availability for coaching camps and exposure and showcases and all these things that really didn't even exist as much 15 years ago, 10 plus years ago. So Joyner's kind of had the spotlight on him for a long time. He was able to, graduate early and get in there and get in the program. And Coach Dillman, I'm sure, is getting him stronger and faster. And so I'm really kind of excited to see what he can do. Now Bentley is kind of he's a known commodity. Has been around, a coach's son. I still think he is a good quarterback, but it is nice to have a guy like Joyner waiting in the wings. Kind of reminds me of the old when Michael Vick. I'm a Virginia Tech fan because that's where my dad went to school. And I remember when Michael Vick wasn't starting yet, but I tell you, everybody talked about him because the players saw it every day in practice. And while you had an established, upperclassman quarterback that was fully capable of running the team and winning a lot of games, it's nice to have this little ace in the hole behind that starter. So should anything happen to Bentley, it would not surprise me to see Joyner go in there and be able to confidently lead some drives for that team.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see if Bentley can work on the stuff he needs to work on and has a good season like I think he's going to have.
Mm-hmm.
I could see him entering the draft early, and then we'll see next year. I would probably say Joyner's probably going to redshirt, but I would anticipate, him and if Ryan Holinsky, the kid from Orange, California,
right, mm-hmm.
who's rated, I think Rivals has 55th overall in the country. I mean, I think they'll probably be competing for that job, and it's going to be interesting to see. Wrap it up with a couple of lifestyle type questions. I remember last year you visited, you did a vacation in Cuba. I got to hear how was that?
Oh my gosh, absolutely wonderful. I went down there for my 40th birthday. My wife and I went down there, and we stayed in Airbnbs the whole time. So the way they do it down there, the Airbnbs are known as Casa Particular, and that just means you're living in somebody's house. And the good part about that is there's somebody that cooks for you every morning. You are the first place we stayed was down in Vinales Valley, which is in the Pinar del Rio province where all the tobacco is grown. That's where the majority of tobacco on the island is grown, in this one valley. And it is wonderful. It's about 2 hours away from Havana. I would recommend that anybody going to Cuba consider spending a couple days down in Vinales because it's just absolutely beautiful. And it almost feels like you're going back in time because it's just tobacco farms and rolling hills, really beautiful. The people could not be nicer. Always felt safe, felt appreciated. The American dollar, it goes 1-to-1 for their dollar that they have for the tourists, and the locals use their own currency, but that currency is only valued at 1/25th of a regular dollar. So, you tip somebody $1 down there, you're making their day because the average Cuban citizen makes only about $35 to $50 a month. The way their system works down there. So they definitely appreciate the American tourists and all tourists in general. But now that, Americans have been able to go a little more freely here the last few years, Europeans have been able to go there since the beginning of time. So they're already used to those folks. We saw lots of Germans, lots of British folks, Portugal, Spain, lots of different tourists from all over Europe. But now that the Americans are in the mix too, the business down there is booming. Roads are being fixed. Parts of old Havana that have just been crumbling for decades are now starting to be fixed up. They have a historic preservation program where a certain percentage of all the tourism dollars, from taxes from the hotels and restaurants and everything, goes into a historic preservation fund specifically to spruce up old Havana. So I would imagine that maybe 10 years from now, it's already starting to look a lot nicer, but maybe 10 years from now, it's going to look even better. But great trip. I'd highly recommend it. Maybe when my kids are a little bit older, we'll take another trip down there because I'd love for them to see it too.
Yeah, I'd like to get down there one day myself. It looked, the pictures I saw that you posted on Twitter and such, it looked beautiful. And I love some Cuban food. Don't love their obsession with black beans and everything because I hate beans. But I do love some Cuban food.
Well, as long as you like rum, you're going to the right spot because they love their rum down
there. I don't drink,
that's for sure.
So
oh, no.
I don't drink, so that's not going to do me any good either. But last question, we'll stay on the food subject because I met you in Mobile at the Senior Bowl.
Sure.
Tell me your favorite place to eat when you come down here.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, man. Well, it's hard to knock Wenzel's because I go every year. It's just tradition. And that's about half as much as who I see in the restaurant as I enjoy the food. So there's kind of a double reason for going there. But also, Saucy Q Barbecue. There's a neat little, and I wish I could remember the name of it, but a few blocks away from Lad Peebles now there's a little bake shop. It's like an old house that's been turned into a restaurant that has coffee and desserts and soups and sandwiches. I'm totally blanking on the name right now. I could tell you almost how to get there. It's off, Virginia Avenue, Virginia Street, whatever it is that runs by the stadium. It's a few blocks from the stadium, but it is a great spot to run to in between practice sessions. And a lot of scouts, I think, figured that out over the last 2 years because both times I went there were a lot of NFL front office guys all sitting in there. So I think the word is out on that place, and I'd love to give it a plug, but I can't think of the name of it. So maybe you can look that up for me and announce it.
I'll have to look that up, and I'll tweet it to you.
Yeah.
There's so many places. I mean, I see them all, like I said, because I live here, so it's old hat to me. But I have some favorite barbecue joints and everything that I love here too. But Austin, hopefully I'll get to see you down at the Senior Bowl again in January. I'll think we'll cross paths in a couple of years.
Yeah, and I think the new leadership down there is going to do a great job, in fact, too. So I'm looking forward to them carrying that torch and continuing to make it a special event that all of us in the NFL community, agents and scouts and everybody, thoroughly enjoy going down there. So hopefully I can see you the next time I'm there, okay?
I look forward to it. Austin, thanks a lot for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. That was Austin Atkinson of Atkinson Sports. He's a agent representing several players in the NFL currently. He's a native of Charleston, South Carolina, covers South Carolina prep sports for the Post and Courier newspaper. Great guy. We covered a lot today we talked about the Alliance of American Football and how he feels that's going to go, along with the XFL. We talked about the 2018 season for the South Carolina Gamecocks and their future quarterback, Kerryon Joyner. And we even talked about Cuba. So a well-rounded podcast today. Hope you enjoyed listening. I want you to go back and after you've listened to this one, go back and listen to some of our other ones. We talked last week with Craig Stevenson of AL.com about the South Alabama football stadium. We've talked Browns, Lions, Redskins. We've talked a lot in these last 10 weeks. So I encourage you to go to blogtalkradio.com/deepfrieddraft or download, search Deep Fried Draft in iTunes if that's your method of listening to podcasts. And download it. Give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We always love to get some feedback. Anyway, thanks again for Austin coming on today and talking agent stuff and things going forward. Hope you enjoyed today's show. As always, follow me on Twitter at DeepFriedDraft, and you can find all of my work at deepfrieddraft.com or facebook.com/deepfrieddraft. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Until next time.
At Outback Steakhouse, we live by Aussie rules. And Aussie rule number 1 is ensuring steak satisfaction every time. We offer the highest quality cuts of steak, seasoned and seared to perfection, with a secret blend of 17 herbs and spices and cooked just the way you want. So join us tonight in Mobile at 4017 Airport Boulevard. We're open daily for lunch at 11 a.m. Plan your visit at Outback.com. Aussie rules. At Outback Steakhouse, we live by Aussie rules. And Aussie rule number 1 is ensuring steak satisfaction every time. We offer the highest quality cuts of steak, seasoned and seared to perfection, with a secret blend of 17 herbs and spices and cooked just the way you want. So join us tonight in Mobile at 4017 Airport Boulevard. We're open daily for lunch at 11 a.m. Plan your visit at Outback.com. Aussie rules.